I have a new video to share with y'all. This is part 2 from Marco Cecala, and in this video he will be showing you a simple but very classy looking wrap that he is using to wrap a snake guide on a rod blank. I will leave a link to part 1, which was Marco's tips and tools, in the description box below this video, and I will also have a link in the upper right hand corner of this video as well, and I would highly encourage you to check that out if you haven't seen it already. I will also have a link to Marco's rod building business website in the description box below as well. Even though this is a snake guide, the same principles used in this wrap would apply to any guide wrap. Even if you're into building a specific type of a rod, I would still encourage people to watch all different types of rod building videos: fly rods, ice fishing rods, saltwater, and freshwater. You just never know when you'll find a tip or technique that you can incorporate into your own rod building practices. Everyone has a little different approach, and that is a good thing. That's why I'm happy to be able to share Marco's videos with everyone. We don't do things exactly the same way, and that's actually a very good thing, to be exposed to different types of rod builders and what they're doing. You might pick up something from anybody along the way that helps you out. Marco is extremely good at what he does, and with that, I will turn the video over to Marco, and I hope y'all enjoy it.
All right, so now I'm going to wrap a guide on a fly rod. I'm just going to wrap one of the shooting guides, and I use snake brand guides, and this is not worked on. This is right from the factory, so I haven't prepped this at all. And you'll see that these are really nice, low profile. Thread climbs up on them easily. Great guides. If you're going to hand build a rod, you might as well use the best stuff. They're not really much more than the not so good stuff. These are dental rubber bands that I use. I take a couple of them, wrap them around the blank, and then slide them up. And this is a wax pen mark that shows me where I want the blank so I can mark them before I put the guides on. And then this is a tape. This tape is used for putting grid lines on dry erase marker boards, and it has a little bit of stretch to it, and I wrap it kind of going away from me, and I put a tab here because this stuff loves to stick to itself, and you'll see how that works a little bit later and why I wrap it the way I do. And then I put a piece of tape here. These two things, do I use them all the time? No. But they allow me to do one thing, and that one thing is to concentrate on my wrap and where it's going to go, and how tight it is, and how it looks, and how it's organized. People are paying for a bespoke rod, and this is just one of the things that I use to make sure they look as good as possible. I've also put a line here. This marks the dirty side of the rod, and that means that's where I'm going to start and stop a second color. The formula for this is 5 wraps of purple, and then 5 of purple and silver, and then finish off the wrap with purple. So let me get started. And while I'm doing this, I'll try not to bang the camera and make everybody seasick, but let's see how that goes. Okay, so I'm going to start, and I'm going to wrap it a few times around here, and then I'm going to take a piece of tape. Now this piece of tape, after I cut this off, that piece of tape is going to be used for my pull through on the tie off, so I don't have to worry about finding something else. Okay, let me move this over just a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to come here and start. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, at 4, even on a slippery rod like this glass rod, this is going to be secure. What I want to do is I want to get this down and cut it right at the pencil mark. And you'll see I'm going to twist the thread, and that tightens it up. So when I cut this with the scissors, it comes away cleanly. Then I'm going to take this and hold it here. See, I take it and just stick it on the tape. And that's now my pull through. That goes on the side of the rod support, and Now I'm going on to 5, so I want this to be all nice and snugged up and ready to go. Okay, now it's time to bring in the silver. Now I exclusively use embroidery thread, Madeira, poly neon, and I've had no problems with fish eyes. I've even gone directly over it with Gen 4 epoxy and never had a problem with it generating any fish eyes. So take that for what it's worth. This is a little bit long. This tail's kind of crazy long, so I'm going to cut that out of the way. Then get the silver in the tension rod. And now what I want to do is I want to make sure this silver comes into the purple before that point and also covers that purple thread I cut. Okay, I've got one. And you see it kind of go over the top of this a little bit funny. There's two. It really got out of the way. So you can see it's not a big deal as long as it finishes up okay. There's two. Okay, I'm going to go 3 with this one because there's a lot of tension on that. I guess I should probably loosen that up a little bit. So now we're at 3, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here where we can all see this. And I'm going to get my thread. It's pretty good right there. Now you notice I kind of pull it back up the rod a little bit to get it snug against there. And you'll see it's kind of leaving a space there because I'm really putting some tension on it. I snug that up. And then again, I twist and cut. Okay. So that's 3. That's 4. And 5. Yeah. Okay. So that's done. I'm going to go a little bit past my mark. I'm going to take my silver thread and I'm going to cut this below the eyelet down here. I want a fair amount of this silver because here's how I'm going to get back out of it. Now, my carriage was a little bit too far this way. I'm going to slide it back a little bit so I get this line here, which is now a little bit away, kind of back in towards the main wrap because I want it tight against those things. I don't want to have to keep packing it every time. There we go. 2, 3. 3 is the minimum, and 4 is sometimes better. So now that I've got pretty much a natural disaster here, I'm going to try to snug these up a little bit and show you how we make this look a little bit better, at least for now. If you're looking at the double wrap, you'll see some spots in it. I'll show you how we fix those later. That's not a big deal. Okay, you can see the silver here because when we came over the top of it, it was not snug. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull this back and come down. Now, don't be concerned if you're pulling on it. You go, you know what? I'm just going to do another wrap because it's really not that snug yet. And it depends on the tension you're wrapping. But hand wrapping, you'll always have good tension. Now you'll see very closely, if you look, and I'll put a line here, if you look, those two are pretty much even with each other. So that's in good shape. That's what we want. I'm good to go. Okay, got a little bit of a gap. I'm going to snug that up a little bit because I like to keep it clean as I go along, especially when I get near climbing up on the guide foot. Okay. There we go. Now, that climbed up real nice. Now, as I get close to that black tape, what I do is I grab my tweezers, I grab that tab that I folded over. You can see here what it looks like. Okay. So now I just hold it and continue wrapping, and it just unwraps the tape, and that's done. So the next thing I want to concern myself with is where I put the pull loop in, and then this one will be done. Little gap here. Now, because at least this part of the blank, I can move it left or right. So I'm not as concerned about moving the carriage for two reasons. One, for filming, and two, because I can snug it up against here and get it tight on its own, or I can move it the other way if it's wrapping over itself. Okay, I'm good where I want to put the pull loop in. And you'll notice here's my mark, but I'm going to come around till that's at about a little bit past 12 o'clock on the rod. Now watch when I put the pull loop in. It's tight against here, the thread's down, it doesn't gap, and everything's good. Okay, now the next question is, how far up the guide do I put my wrap? Now see that doubled back on itself, so I can move it out of the way a little bit. And the great thing is, with the tension rod, I don't even think about backing up. I just back up. Heck, I've backed up probably 8 turns before, and it still holds good tension. Now, we're getting close, okay? But I want to climb up a little bit on the guide. I like a little bit of a gap. I can get some epoxy underneath here, and that helps it soak in really well. And then on the last one, you might need to pull it like this, and we're good. Hold it here, release the tension rod, cut some thread. A tip is the more static electricity you have, the longer you'll want this tag end here, because you can take your hand and just kind of slide it down. I kind of slid it over the rod and pulled it down. And then, as Kevin taught me, we have this here. I'm going to cut it so there's about 1/8. Try to cut it completely. And then I'm going to pull it through at an angle, and we're good to go. Okay, and now we'll do the other side. Okay, now it's time for the other side of the guide. So what I've done here is I've turned the rod around. Can I wrap from right to left? Absolutely. Have I done it? Oh yeah, plenty of times. But the thing is, it's easier this way. So why do I make things harder on myself for no apparent reason? So what I've done now is I've slid the rubber bands out of the way because I've got a guide up here a little bit more that I've got to tie in. And I'm making my thread start 1/4 inch away. So I've got my caliper set at 1/4 inch, and I put this here. Let me show you how I put this on. I wrap it around, and I'll make it kind of goofy here. So if I'm not lined up, if the gap isn't right, you can come back a little bit and kind of just put some pressure on the thing one way or the other. And once you get it overlapped, you can either cut it, or what I'll do is I'll take my finger and run it here to kind of push it this way so it doesn't stick out here. It just goes that way. That's not too much. That's in good shape. The next thing I do is I mark my dirty side. Now I'll do the cleanup at the very last. I'll show you how that goes. All right. So wrap. The number of wraps you do on this is not important. What is important is where the tape goes. Now I use this orange tape, which is pretty tenacious stuff. I don't want it on the thread. It can pull the thread apart. This stuff, as you probably know, is very fragile while you're wrapping. So until it gets epoxy on it, it's really not held together as tight as we'd like to think it is, which is another reason I have this tape, and I'll show you in a minute a better example of that. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to do 2, 3, 4. I can't do this at regular speed because the camera's in my face and it's difficult, but I can do okay. Have I timed myself wrapping guides? No, I just do whatever it takes. You know, they got to be done. Sorry about that. They got to be done. And I got to make sure that they look right. So some take longer than others. And as you start moving up the rod and the guides get smaller, yes, it's a bigger pain. No, there's no easy way around it. The only thing is that I do wrap my tip tops in a single color. because when this gets on a smaller blank section, it just looks really lousy. Okay, so I've got my 4 wraps. I've cut my piece. I've made my tie loop. We're going to 5 here. And I'm going to bring in the silver. And again, threading this through is a heck of a lot easier when you're like right in front of the thing. Here I'm kind of wrapping sideways, so it's not easy. Kevin and I were trying to discuss the best way to film, and there's probably no good way to film, and there's no good way for you people to see exactly what we're doing, but we're trying to get as close as we can. So bear with us and ask questions if you need to. Always happy to answer. Okay, taped off. Tension rod. Back it up a little bit. And here we go. 1, 2. I'm going to go 3 before I pull this off and get it set up and cut it. You can see I'm a little bit above where I want to be. And all right, I've snugged this up. Looking good. I'm a little bit high still. Again, if I'm high or low, I don't care. This is an indicator mark. It helps me count revolutions and sort of tells me where I want to be. So I happen to be right on the mark. If I'm high, I'll just make the ending high. I just want these things right across from each other. That's all. The only reason I'm doing this. It makes it look clean. If you can see the one on the right, it looks really nice. That's what you want. I'll show you how to clean these up even more when we're done. All right, we're at 3. We start 4. And 5. Go a little bit past. Remove the tension rod. Give myself more thread than I think I need, because what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to hold this, slide the carriage back a little bit so I get a good angle. I'm going to hold this, going to keep the tension on this, and we're going to wrap this. And you see I'm using my middle finger to coax that purple thread back over where it needs to go. There's 3. And there's 4. And you can actually count the threads here. So, if you're wondering how many you have, there you go. Okay, so again, I got a mess. I don't care. Now I start tightening things up and make it look pretty. So I get this out of the way and start snugging up. A lot of people think this is really a fussy way to do guides, and it may be, but the thing is, it's always worked for me, and I just really like the results I get. Okay, so I'm pretty far down, and you see I come up a little bit and then I pull this back down, because when I pull it back down to tighten it, sometimes this will move up a little bit. Again, I want this tight against there, so I'm going to come do another wrap. And this is kind of messed up here, and I'll show you how to fix that here in a second. Slide it over so we get better alignment, and here we go. Okay, pull that down, get it snug, and we are in great shape here. Okay, so I also wet my fingertips. I can't spin this thread just without wetting my fingertips on a sponge. I don't know why. Okay, let's see if I can get this to not go up on the guide and show you what I do. Okay, so there it went to the guide, and you'll see it is back on itself. Okay, so let's say that happens. Now, it happened because my thread was too far this way, but I'll just show you what I do. I kind of move back away, and I start by wrapping this thing just a little bit away. And as I'm doing that, after the second one, I start coaxing things in towards the center. Okay, I kind of move them in, and you don't want to push too far, because the thread way down here is sticking out to the right, so it'll cross over that if you do too much. I see a little bit of silver. There we go. There, that's gone. And now we're off to the races. All I've got to do is get my pull loop. Which is about in 2. All right. And I'm probably all over the board on my pull loop location. Now see, this one's out a little bit, so I'm just going to tighten that up before I go, and I'm right back where I want to be. I don't have to keep messing with that. And you've got to remember that a thread tension has more to do with the pull loop breaking than how many threads you've gone. I've gone 10, 12 threads. Now this is easily probably that, and it's never caused me a problem. If it's really good tension, too tight, I might not be able to get the pull through with 3 wraps. I'm looking to see the exposure between these 2 ends, and they're good. Now, I'm going to show you in a second another thing you have to watch out for when you're doing this. Again, this thread's kind of trying to stick to itself, so I'm going to go through. Once I snug this up, I can cut this. Now, if I have a little piece of thread come through, I don't mess with it. Some people hit it with a lighter or a torch, and I just wait. I wait till I get either color preserver or a coat of epoxy on it, and then I smooth it out. But that is another video. So here's what I do when everything is said and done. I have this little tool. It's triangular, and it works really great. So what I do first is you'll see that these are not really round, or they're not following concentric. And I'm going to take and clean these up. Okay. Now, if I climbed up on here and I know I have a lot of gaps, I've got to be careful because as I tighten this up, it might slide down too far. Okay. To save time and messing around, as soon as I get here, I'm going to go to this side and do the same thing. Then I come to the other guide. I put it here. Okay. Now, once I get that looking pretty good, it's time to do the final burnishing on this thing and clean up these areas here. If you have ever tied a guide and you maybe didn't do this process that I do, where you're going to take and put a piece of tape here, if you burnish this direction to the right, you can literally untie the guide. And I'm going to come here. Now, oh, geez, I'm sorry about that. I'm shaking it. So you'll see how nice and neat these look now. And they were kind of messed up a little bit before. But we're good now. So, like I say, if you want to, you can really come down here and smooth that out. And then the last thing we want to do is just take a tool and get rid of this tape. Now, this orange tape, I have had it take off painted finish on fiberglass rods before. So you've got to be careful with it. It's, like I say, it's pretty tenacious stuff, and it can mess things up. And there we have a tied fly guide.